of the most debated aspects of the pro wrestling business in the modern day is whether Joey Ryan using his penis as a weapon is going too far in terms of breaking kayfabe. Just let that settle in your brain for a second. This is what we have to deal with. There's certainly an element of truth to it, but I would always want to be entertained first and foremost. And besides, it's not like there haven't been earlier and much worse examples than this. Hundreds of times throughout the years, even when we were trying to keep the magic alive, some schmo has come along and broken the walls down, and Chris Jericho wasn't even anywhere to be seen. I'm Simon from What Culture. Remember to hit that subscribe button. This is 10 precise moments kayfabe ended. Number 10, the fix is in. Let's turn the clock back to September 4th, 1911, when Frank Gotch and George Hackenschmidt competed in what was labeled the event of the century. For some time, Gotch had been pulling the wool over the world's eyes due to his incredible technical submission prowess, and the sport was so well respected that it not only outdrew boxing, was also seen as more legitimate. Given that Hackenschmidt was known throughout the lands for his strength and resolve, it seemed like a brilliant matchup. Furthermore, this was a follow-up from a 2-hour encounter they had in 1908 that many people believed to be a shoot. So when this one ended in just 20 minutes with a sudden finish, many people had a few questions, including the Chicago Tribune, who wrote in their paper that as the audience filtered out of the arena that night, they felt like the fix was in. No one knew 100% what had happened, but it didn't feel right. In short, they had been worked, and while they couldn't say that specifically, deep down it had rubbed them the wrong way. It was the start of wrestling dropping from the top of the pile, and the last time it was even ever close. Number 9, from death to success. Jack Pfeiffer was a controversial promoter. To try and put over his version as the real deal, he wrote to the press to admit that other forms of pro wrestling were a big lie. Somewhat interestingly, the product he was behind was very sports entertainment focused, with quote-unquote freaks being front and center, who were then supported by little people and strongmen grapplers. Jack was also always on the lookout for those who had an abundance of human growth hormone that made them giants. I hope you see the similarities. It was all very outlandish, and throughout the 1930s, he almost killed the industry entire with one letter to the New York Daily Mirror. It only recovered after the birth of Capital Wrestling Corporation. It was formed by Toots Mond and one Jess McMahon. It would soon become the WWF in 1963 and set itself apart before exploding with one Bruno Sammartino. So in many ways, it was Pfeiffer destroying the business before a giant eagle flew out of the ashes, and it's one that's still here today. Probably isn't going anywhere for a long time either, even though some people want it to, as the Raw ratings continue to decrease. Wrestling fans are weird. Number 8, Vince McMahon drops the pretense. Let's not pretend otherwise. No one ever thought pro wrestling was real. Just look at the powerbomb. It's literally impossible to do, and don't go and try it either. Doesn't work. This meant whoever could cast the spell the best made the most money, much like a good magician could trick people into thinking they'd been sawn in half. Obviously they haven't, because they'd be dead, and yet somehow you questioned the whole thing. That is, of course, unless they looked you straight in the eye and went, yeah, that was massively fake, bro. This was Vince McMahon in 1989. Seeing that the classification of wrestling as a real sport would hurt his bottom line, he went to the New Jersey State Senate in that year and just told them that WWF was, and I quote, an activity in which participants struggle hand in hand primarily for the purpose of providing entertainment to spectators rather than conducting a bona fide athletic contest. Or in short, it's not real. The bill passed through, and it meant Vince was able to save a lot of cash, even though he had just given up the biggest secret of all. And guess what? In the aftermath, nobody was that shocked. Number 7, Brian Pillman calls out the booker. Brian Pillman was revolutionary in the mid-90s. A true loose cannon, as the nickname suggested, he relied on creativity to get himself over and did it wonderfully. Pitched perfectly and performed superbly, Brian came across like a maniac right down to the way he stared into the camera. Not even his fellow wrestlers knew if he was acting or not, which led to countless confused faces and a lot of worry. Could you actually trust what he was going to do? The answer was no, you could not. Buying into the idea as much as he could, Pillman worked everyone, including boss Eric Bischoff, when he grabbed a microphone 1 minute into his fight with Kevin Sullivan and said, I respect you, Booker man. This was basically Brian admitting that the guy he was facing off against was also the person writing the script. While it meant nothing to the casual crowd, it was more the fact that he did it to begin with. He was so rebellious and therefore let a fire through the dirt sheets and the more informed fan. If you did get intrigued by the sentence and went out and researched it too, you'd would likely have learned the seedy truth about pro wrestling. That's why it was considered so outlandish, but man, didn't Brian Pillman smash it. Number 6, Jackie's confession. Jackie Palo was one of the earliest stars of the British pro wrestling circuit. In what could have come straight out of the modern day, his approach and the reaction to it backstage wasn't at all dissimilar to the criticism drawn by the Young Bucks Orange Cassidy and most next generation stars who will experiment beyond what others are used to. Palo was considered as much as a menace to the integrity of wrestling even though it was working. Audience hated his horrible actions and cocky theatrics, and he became such a household name he would outdraw the football. You know what he did to pull them in even more? He'd bite his lip to produce that all-important drama-enhancing blood. It was after he retired when he really struck a chord, though. In his 1985 autobiography, You'll Grunt, I'll Groan, Jackie revealed the inner workings of the business, and while again most people knew, this all pissed off the veterans something fierce. Not the way you did things. Palo's justification was loyal to his old heel persona because he declared that the out-of-shape stars of the 70s had already given this layup with their terrible athleticism. What a bad guy. Number 5, Koji Katao loses it. Koji Katao always seemed like he was mad about something. Expelled from the sumo world after battering a trainee, this controversy followed him into the world of pro wrestling where he just couldn't help himself. Got worse if anything, and that was shown in his infamous match with John Earthquake Tenta where he proved he had zero respect for anyone. Throughout the years, many people had tried to expose the truth on Japanese shores but failed. For example, the great Antonio had tried to muck around with Antonio Inoki, who responded by beating him up for real. That's a good way to protect the integrity, but Koji was different. Refusing to deal with Tenta because he didn't think he was at his level, Katao was just super awkward and didn't play ball. After John screamed at him, Koji went and kicked the referee. He was a bit of a dick. The worst was still to come as he grabbed a microphone and shouted, "You're just a monkey in this fake wrestling circus." He was fired afterwards, and once again, wrestling continued to exist and be profitable. It's not like he was saying anything we didn't know. Although, John Tenta was not a monkey, he's a damn hero. Number 4, Vince Russo's dumb idea. Write October the 18th, 1999 in your diaries. That was when Vince Russo made his mark on WCW Nitro. It was just so weird and, dare I say it, stupid. Setting the tone for what was to come, he just confused everyone from the hardcores to the casuals as he focused on what could be going on backstage. For some reason, the work shoot aspect was the most important thing in the world to Mr. Russo. As such, wrestlers began to acknowledge that they were working from a script. Medusa complained that they were making her perform in an evening gown match, and Tony Schiavone and Bobby Heenan outwardly told us that Buff Bagwell was going against what he had been told to do. On this night, Bagwell was wrestling the Parker, and because he had been told he was going to lose, he just acted all lazy and even insulted his own taunts. It was like watching wrestling die in front of your face because you were actively being told that it was all a joke and you were an idiot for watching and even believing. It's the main factor in what killed World Championship Wrestling, and if you try and watch it now, you will struggle a lot. Number 3, Hashimoto gets destroyed. New Japan Pro Wrestling was founded and driven by the legit skills of Antonio Inoki and what he wanted pro wrestling to be. Everything about the presentation adhered strictly to Kayfabe, and that included the tournament frameworks, the clean finishes, and the lack of theatrical stipulation matches. Eventually, they felt the need to experiment, which betrayed their old values to some, and even when a ladder was introduced to the Omega-Tanahashi feud in 2016, some people raised an eyebrow. This was not pro wrestling. Ironically, it was Inoki's pursuit of legitimacy that almost killed the very promotion he founded. Feeling that Naoya Ogawa was the future of the company, Inoki apparently told him to break kayfabe in a match against Shinya Hashimoto, meaning he shot on him for real. The New Japan roster ran in to try and calm this down, with a proper fracas erupting as others also got twonked for real. Certain individuals ended up in hospital. The whole thing also left Hashimoto beaten and bloodied, and it was so violent and over the top it was quite clear this wasn't part of the show. And how strange was that? Because it was too real, it made everything else look like a planned event, which is exactly what had just happened. Number 2, Dixie Carter talks to the roster. In 2009, Dixie Carter addressed the TNA roster and kind of exposed everything in pro wrestling. No, I don't get it either. Not only did it start off ridiculous as rivals, heels and faces all sat together amicably, but it burned to the ground when Dixie said this: "When you're questioning things in this company, you're questioning me, and I cannot allow that to happen. Business is about choices, and I've made the choice to put my finances and passion behind you in this company, and now it's time for you to do the same. It's time for you to support the direction TNA is going, or you can find another place to work. It's time for us to swing for the fences. It really is." So not only did she make make total non-stop action just sound like a place you turn up to work and then maybe do some wrestling, but she also placed the entire blame for TNA's woes on the entire roster. When you watched TNA back then, that was the one good thing they had going for them. If nothing else, it was clear that if you didn't know that wrestling was one big work, well, we were shining a light on just that fact. The message was that no one had been taking things seriously, but now they should. And I think when most fans saw this, they just went and watched WWE instead. Number 1, the shifting face of WWE. WWE had never been shy of admitting that its product was predetermined, as we've already touched upon. Look at the Montreal Screwjob and the fallout from that. That basically forced Vince McMahon to address the scripted nature of the product. It was a different approach in August 2017, however, as it didn't just acknowledge how the industry worked, but literally told the audience that whoever the face of the WWE was, well, they have to know how to present themselves. This came to a head during the John Cena versus Roman Reigns feud, which was pitched around the idea that the former knew how to be the top guy, whereas the latter didn't. That's why Cena told Roman to go and figure out what a promo was. He straight up said that Reigns needed to get better at it, to which the Big Dog responded that despite his best attempts, John wouldn't be able to bury him on this occasion. I guess because Roman was booked to win or something. This was proper through the looking glass stuff, and it was likely what happened in a lot of management meetings, but now it was just happening in the ring. It was weird, but kind of cool, I think. Know of any other moments where kayfabe just ended? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Then head over to whatculture.com and read yourself more articles like this. Follow What Culture on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. Watch more videos here on What Culture Wrestling. My name is Simon from What Culture, and I will talk to you again soon.